Welcome back. Brittany and I are laughing because we're always like, you ready to start? And then we're like, yeah, let's start. And then once she clicks start, we have a 3-second countdown. I'm like, no, I have to ask you this. And then we're live. So now we're here. Anyways, I wanted to ask you, you said like this chapter really boiled down into like this one thing. What was that one thing that you were saying?
The idea of a true self versus a contingent self.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
the
that's
contingent.
the
That's the
contingent
word.
self. Which we're going to be diving into.
Oh, we will. But that contingency, that was like my big takeaway, I think, from this chapter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to get to that. The first thing we have to do is hear my beautiful summary.
All right.
I'm manifesting that.
Okay. All right. So 2-minute summary.
Let's do it.
All right. Setting the clock. 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. Chapter 8 talked about how to authentically be yourself in the world and navigating different contingencies that come with it through external pressures, right? So it starts off by talking about how integration is important and how we have these interjects that come into our heads that tell us the kind of people we should be, the kind of things we should do, but how we don't internalize those things. And it ends up being this pressure that we feel against ourselves. So interjects, that was like the first thing we tackled. And then it talked about making love contingent, which, I can't wait to talk to you about that, Brittany. Ooh. Talking about how love becomes contingent when we use different framings and in our interactions too. If we end up like trying to get people to behave or listen to us by withdrawing our love or using punitive things, then we're making love contingent and we're going to hurt ourselves in the long run. Then, moving on, it talked about the ego involvement, which is when people's feelings of worth depend upon the outcomes that they experience. And it looked at how that occurs and why that occurs. And then it ended up moving into how you can kind of reframe in your mind how you think about something to be able to process it, and how self-esteem can also become contingent, and how we end up having this kind of feeling where we feel like we have to be better than others rather than simply being good and worthy like others, and how praise does not always do what we hope it will do. And I'm only on page 121. And then it talked about emotions and owning your emotions. I think that was pretty good. If this book had headings, I think I would have hit them.
Yeah. So why don't you just write in headings?
I should. That's an interject. I can do that if I prioritize that in my schedule. But we're currently in the stage where Brittany was telling me I showered, like my hair is wet because I showered, because you get in the shower when you can. And I'm in the stage of life now with my baby where my inner dialogue is pick the most basic need, right?
Yeah.
And I go with that one. Mm-hmm. So typically it is cleanliness, because I got a reflux baby. Or it's eating, because if you are a breastfeeding mom, you know that struggle. Or it's sleep, because my baby's very fond of the hours of 3 to 6 a.m. and gets FOMO about missing out on all that happens during those times. He's so cute. He's just there. He's just like looking around, smiling. And I'm like, go to sleep.
Right. They're so happy between the hours of 3 to 6, but by the hours of like noon to 3, they're little
monsters. About it.
Very adorable, but man, I'll never forget that.
It's funny too, because my baby, I brought him to my sister's house yesterday, and her baby started to scream and cry. She's teething. And then my baby like jumped and like curled into me. And I'm like, buddy, this is you though. Like you do this all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Chapter
You
8.
ready to summarize?
Yep.
All right. On your mark, get set, go.
Okay, so in chapter 8, the self in a social world really looked at what happens when we pit autonomy against relatedness or belonging. And that is using belonging, using relatedness, using love to control. And DC describes an intrinsic self, and that is the self that just develops in accord with its nature. And it is an like a self-organizing self that it's going to follow its natural tendencies, which is to be um, really to be thoughtful and carry on the interests of its social world, because we are as a species, we are concerned about our evolution and our ability to prosper and grow. Um, yeah. So the true self is um, it is just naturally wanting to benefit society. And we see that true self become influenced and can become dark, have like a shadow come over it when it's heavily controlled by society, which one way that society tries to control the self. Oh, what? Nah, for real?
You
That was
timed out.
terrible.
No, that was
That's why
not.
I'm
I feel
writing,
like
bro.
we always take different takes. Did you write the summary or you were just talking?
No, I was just talking.
See,
Oh, yeah.
that's what
See, like,
I
there's so
do.
many different points. Huh?
I know. There's so many different points.
Ego involvement,
But I touched
contingent
upon
versus
those
my
things.
contingent self. What?
So I feel like between the two of us, people get a good gist about what happened.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
to start, why don't we talk about one of the big things in this chapter, which are introjects. Tell the lovely people what an introject is, Britt.
Okay, so an introject is a part of oh gosh. Okay, so an introject is a thought or pressure that comes or that is introjected into your motivation by society. So a really good example that that DC used was the lawyer's son who or actually no, it was a business owner's son. So the business owner's son takes over the family business, but his intrinsic self, his inherent self, doesn't really want to. He feels pressured by the family. The idea of taking over the business is an introject. It's not something that can be fully integrated into that son's personality and person because he's only half-heartedly in it. He doesn't really
Mhm.
want to do it.
Yeah.
So when things are forced, ideas, beliefs, values, when they are introjected, they're not really integrated into who we are and our beliefs and our values. So introject is like half-heartedly believing in something, where integration is we integrate it into who we are. Um,
To make it
the
more superficial, we could
is
say,
introjection.
well, here's my superficial metaphor, right?
Oh,
An
okay.
introject is skinny jeans when internalization is athleisure,
I like
right?
that.
I feel like we're
Yeah,
onto something with that one.
yeah. So for me, um, what would okay, so an introjection for me would be that an introjection for me is that I put the key on the hook so my husband can find it when he needs it. And, I didn't really understand why I couldn't just leave the key on the counter or leave the key out and about where it's visible, until my husband got very angry. And
Episode
said
2, season 1.
episode 2, and it disrupted one of the podcast episodes, and then it became integrated because I'm like, "Oh, okay, so he really needs me." Like, when I don't put it on the hook, then it is really hard for him to find, and it's really frustrating. And so now I habitually put the key on the hook. That behavior is now integrated. When it was introjected, it was kind of superficially like believed in or superficially
Mhm.
acted upon. I would only do it sometimes. But once now it's integrated, it is a part of my routine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about laundry now that I've had a baby,
Yeah.
you know? Although I don't know because I don't enjoy doing it, right? Like I'm not like, yeah, laundry. But I'm like, oh no,
Well,
we have nothing clean to wear for the baby. Eek.
yeah. I mean, that's a really good point though, because
Mhm.
not everything that you integrate you're going to enjoy, which he does talk about
Yeah.
later in the book. Because that leans itself to um the idea that students have to enjoy everything that they learn.
True.
That's not possible, right?
Yeah.
But when they integrate the understanding that the learning is important,
Mhm.
then they have internalized how they're going to need it, how they would use it. They internalize the why.
Yeah. I love that. And
That's why
that's
we
one of
need
the
to.
things that you can do.
Yeah, it is to make
Increase that motivation.
mhm, and make the
Okay.
learning
So,
stick.
yeah, right. The other thing I want us to talk about is contingent love because this I feel like is my bread and butter. I think for you talk about a lot of neuroaffirming support, and for me, I think I talk a lot about like asset-based lens and unconditional positive regard. And this is also my quote too. So I might go a bit longer with this one. We'll see. We'll see where the quote takes me. But it comes from page 112, and it says, one of the most common approaches to discipline in modern society involves making the provision of love, acceptance, and esteem contingent upon people's behaving in certain ways. This withdrawal of love approach underlies one of the tragic aspects of life, namely that in many circumstances, autonomy and relatedness are turned against each other by people in one-up positions. This does not mean that the needs are by nature antagonistic, only that the social world can capitalize on people's vulnerability to being controlled, to having their autonomy robbed by their need to be related to others. This practice of making love contingent is one of the more controlling ways we can treat children, as well as peers, because it forces them to relinquish autonomy to retain love, and or alternatively, to live as an island. End quote, drop mic, drop book. Right? And that's group contingencies in a nutshell, right? Like, I don't know how many times I did, and I was told when I needed to get the class engaged to be like, I'm not going to move on, or we will go out to recess until everybody picks up their book and puts it here. And then little Ashlyn's like, well, screw this. I don't want to do it. Everybody's like, well, screw you, little Ashlyn, because you're making us late to recess. Right?
Mhm.
Those systems.
Yeah.
We isolate and we other our students when we use them. And they're still being used. Like, it's very common to have group contingencies. It's so manipulative. We're playing at our desire to be related and to feel that sense of belonging. And we're using that to control and manipulate.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, it's not like people are doing it on purpose. People just don't like they don't know.
I don't think
Oh?
teachers know. I don't think teachers know the ramifications that come from using that. But you have to think the people in PBIS who do the behaviors and research, they know what they're doing or they wouldn't be using this.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no. I mean, PBIS is an organizing entity. Like, they have researchers. They have a ton of researchers that look into certain things and publish on certain things and certain outcomes. And so they know. PBIS knows. Same with other entities that are like, what would be another behaviorist organization?
I wasn't thinking
Any
behaviors, but I
ABA,
was thinking Pearson. Oh, yeah.
ABA, like
Mhm.
ABA organizations, companies, practices, they are aware of the ramifications.
Yeah.
They can't not be. The research has been done since the
Yeah.
60s and like is out and publicized and like not just in journals, but like in books. Like Drive was one of the biggest, by Daniel Pink, was one of the biggest books, like top selling books. What, like 10 years ago? That's 10 years ago. Okay. Anyway, so yeah. So I don't think teachers are aware of the ramifications, like the true
No, I don't.
psychological influence or impact.
Yeah.
Because when we use group contingencies, or we use the group or belonging or relatedness to motivate or to control, what the biggest message you're telling the brain is that you are really not a part of this group.
Yeah. And this is what's tricky too, because when you use these things, they work, right? Like, you might get all the kids to stand in their quiet line if they can't go to recess until little Ashlyn stops talking, right? But what's the cost? And if there are alternative ways to get the same result, why not use those?
Yeah. And that's what he says, I think, at the end of one of these chapters, where he's like, the most responsible thing to do would be to find alternative methods that don't have the negative psychological impacts that these extrinsic, controlling, coercive methods have.
It's like unethical to use these methods.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing I think that we miss out on in teaching, like the ethics. Did you ever have an ethics class in your teaching preparation program, or like any attention brought to ethics? Because I think about my friends who are in like therapy or social work, and like ethical considerations are talked about all the time. But in teaching, it's not. These jobs go hand in hand. So I find that interesting. I wonder why.
I don't think that teachers have the time and the mental energy right now to consider or to like really prioritize ethics because they're just so in triage mode.
Yeah, that's
And that
true.
it's but it's self-perpetuating because
I'm not
the
even talking about like teachers in the classroom though. I'm talking about like universities.
ye- yes, I no, I understand that, but I'm saying
Mhm.
like even if they did have an ethics class,
Mhm.
maybe well, they everybody should have an ethics class. Everybody should have a class, I believe, that looks at society and the impacts whatever it is has on society as a whole,
Yeah.
and well-being, right?
Mhm.
But when you have a population that is just surviving, the ethical considerations are not going to be, like, prioritized, right? Like, how you were talking about
Yeah.
prioritizing, like, eating and sleeping, and, like, our system just seems every day we're just in triage mode more
True.
and more, and not just education, but, like,
But
everything.
and yeah, that comes in the chapter 9. We talk about that.
Mhm,
We talk about why we're in triage mode. But on the same token, or the other side of the same token, I don't know what that expression is.
mhm.
But if you have a profession that exists in triage mode, we should be doing something to change how the profession exists and how it works
Oh,
because it's
yeah.
not working,
Yep.
which is
I'm in
what we're
agreement.
doing. Like,
Mhm.
we're here
Yeah. That
disrupting
would be
things.
right, and I feel like that really is on the responsibility of what DC says, like, who's in one-up positions or positions
Yeah.
of influence and authority. Um,
Mhm.
Now granted, that's we can't always rely on those individuals to make systemic change, historically
Yeah.
speaking, and we can do the work and make those changes in our classroom and make them on the more, like, micro level.
Mhm.
And I think that it all accumulates to greater change eventually. Um, but more voices need to be, especially in the spaces that we're in, like social media. Um, that if you've got hundreds of thousands of followers, you really should be having these conversations. I
Mhm.
I would say that it's like ethically irresponsible to not have the bigger conversations that need to be had about systemic change in education.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so I my quote is about it's going to be about contingent versus the non-contingent self because I thought that was really interesting. So it's self-esteem. So
Okay.
contingent self-esteem and true self-esteem. True
Yeah.
self-esteem is accompanied by integrated values and regulations. So those values and regulations that they become internalized with the self. Such individuals evaluate their behaviors, uh, but their feelings of worth as people are not riding on those evaluations. So that's like we can evaluate how well we did on that test or how well we did on that project, but our sense of worth is not attached to it. Um, and that was on page 118. And then 119, Carl Rogers advocated what he called non contingent positive regard. He was suggesting that regard from others, and most importantly from ourselves, is our inalienable right. We are worthy of virtue of the fact that we are alive. And praise is usually different. it is typically made contingent on getting an A on an exam, eating all those vegetables, or cleaning your room. Its hidden message is that you would not be worthy if you had not hit the target. Praise runs the risk of bolstering contingent self esteem rather than true self esteem. And in the process, it strengthens a controlling dynamic in which people become dependent on praise. And I thought that was really interesting because of the way
Mm,
that we rely on extrinsic motivational methods like grades, um,
yeah.
getting on, getting the reward, earning the prize, um, and how are our students internalizing that, and that one, the only reason to learn or the only reason to do well is when you get something, and two, does getting an A make you a good student? Like, does it, how we define um, how we define good, and how that influences our students' idea of how good they are, who they are. Um, those are conversations and questions that we need to be asking, because there are
Yeah.
different ways to motivate a love of learning and curiosity. We shouldn't be relying on grades anymore. The
And this is
research.
where ego involvement also comes in too, right? Because to be ego involved is when you feel like when you hold these interjects and they become your contingent worth. So the example they gave is like a man is ego involved. If his feelings of worth are dependent on amassing a fortune from work, or a woman is ego involved and her exercise of her feelings of worth are dependent on winning a competition in her health club. That's on
Hmm,
page 115. You know,
yeah.
so I feel like for me, I experienced this too, where I feel like I'm ego involved with productivity. Like I feel like I'm not being a good person like a year or so ago if I'm not being productive. So I started observing Sabbath on Saturday. My husband is Seventh day Adventist, and I've been looking more into that. I'm Baptist by nature. And I was like, like this is crazy how hard it is for me to not work and like how much I don't like this. Like the day of rest was not something I enjoyed to begin with. I was just like, I have so much stuff to do and I can't do it right now. Like this is so rough. But now I feel like I've definitely integrated that rest and recognized how
Hmm.
important it is for me. But I thought it was just so crazy how like I would feel down because I wasn't creating
Hmm.
something or using my time productively. And maybe
Hmm.
we can blame the working two full-time jobs at the same time for that, or maybe it's my own psychological things I should talk about in therapy. But whatever.
Break
I
them
think
down live
it's
on the podcast.
interesting. Yeah, I know,
And so,
right? How does that
uh,
make you feel?
so right. Well, okay, so I have this thing about hustle culture, right?
Yeah.
Where and we got into hustle culture in earlier in the book,
Mhm.
where everything that everything that people do, especially in America, because hustle culture is very big in America, everything that people do has like a monetary value to it. What did it get you? And
Yeah.
what was that? It was called something specific. But it was the idea that things that we should just have inherent joy, like art for art's sake,
Mhm.
can't exist anymore because we're so focused on the product and what it
Yeah.
gets us in the end. everything has a means to an end, or everything is a means to an end. And it's really sad because um, that influences the joy and the almost like the relaxing influence that activity should have on us. And it's just like we can't ever relax because we're constantly like impressed upon with this idea that we have to be productive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're relaxing, you're not being productive.
And I feel
Talk
like
about
that same
societal impact.
thing, right? I think that same thing bleeds into social media. Because now when you're scrolling, basically everything is an advertisement. And we're guilty of this too, because we make posts
Yeah.
advertising our resources and
Right.
products. But then,
Right.
I don't know, we didn't always do that, right? Like we used to just post more regular content. But now I feel like doing this for our job, there's definitely more pressure to post and to like hit different goals and things like that. And when you're writing content for the week, it can feel like, I mean, a couple things. Like, number one, it can feel like if you don't share like the next step, like you're not fully helping people, right? You know, or it can also feel like, well, if I'm not like plugging something, how is this post going to be helpful? Like, what's it really going to do? Which is an icky feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. My thing is with like, if I don't post the next step, if I posted the next step, people would be, that's too much information to take on
That's the thing too.
micro, like chewable post.
You can't. Like I've had
Yeah.
people comment and they're like, why can't you just give your course away for free on here or like give me the information? And I'm like, that'd be like asking someone to put in one Instagram post, how do you teach a kid to read? And like get a kid to read in one Instagram post. Like you can't do it. There's so much content there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There's so many different understandings that really need to be built upon. Like,
and unlearned. That's the big thing. Now we're rewiring. We're relearning.
Rewiring 100%. So what is your takeaway?
Well, my takeaway might be like the last thing too. And I guess it's just owning yourself, like owning your emotions. It talked about owning your emotions at the end of this chapter. It said, like, for example, when a man says to his partner, I am angry at you, he will realize it does not necessarily mean his partner did something wrong. Rather, it means he did not get what he wanted. That's page 123. But also in terms of like owning yourself in your own ego involvement, owning yourself in how you are using love, right? Are you giving love unconditionally, or is it contingent upon someone acting the way that they need to act in your classroom, right? Because anybody can show up and love their students when they're sitting at their desk quietly working, right? It's hard to have that unconditional positive regard, the unconditional love when someone's having a meltdown and they're throwing crayons, or they're saying, I effing hate you, and then they're eloping out of the school, right?
Yeah. You're like, I love you so much right now.
I know, but that's when it's so important because they need it. You know, I guess it's don't make love conditional too.
Not just that they need it. Your brain needs it. Because if your brain sees them through that loving lens, it means that your brain isn't as threatened by the behavior. And when you aren't threatened by the behavior, you can think clearly because your executive functioning stays online. So it's not just this. Yeah. It's not just that, like, oh, we need to love all of our students because, you know, they need that love. We need that love too. We need to experience that love so that our brain doesn't distort the idea of the student and make them a threat. So
And
when
we
you
were
make
just talking about this too. We were just talking about this together on Wednesday night, Britt, in the Village
oh yeah.
Plus group coaching call. Like we just had this
Mhm.
conversation with the
100
clients in there.
and so I was just going to mention, because that coaching call, that inspired me, or inspired the mini trainings that I wrote.
Mhm.
And mini trainings are like 5-minute sessions that we have in the village, that they're like 5-minute training sessions that you can watch like when you're grabbing coffee or you have a second.
On your lunch
Um,
break.
yep. And the one of the mini trainings is like, how do we set limits and still love?
Mhm.
Because that was like a big theme
Ooh.
from that
Limitless
coaching call.
love.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Like, how
limited
do
love.
we
Limited love,
limited
love with
that would
limits.
be contingent love. Like, so
Ah!
like, I know.
Damn, I had the
So
alliteration.
so like, but that's a huge, huge question. So how do we, we want to love our students. We want our students to love us. We want to be, we want them to know that we care about them. But is the way that you're reacting to them, if the way that you're caring about them, or if the desire behind the caring and the love is that so they do what you want, you really have to reflect upon, is that really caring? Like, would you, if you had the choice, would you keep that student in your classroom?
Mhm.
And if
The
the
answer to
answer
that
is
question would
no,
be yes.
if the answer is no, don't fake it till you make it. Now be respectful, but when you fake the joy, you fake the kindness, people have a tendency to overcompensate, and that flags a neurodivergent brain. Okay? So don't fake it. Be respectful. Now, you got to keep that lens of that, hey, emotions change and so do relationships. Just because
Mhm.
you don't like the student right now doesn't mean that you're not going to like that student in 2 months to a week, because
Yeah.
we're emotional beings.
Mhm.
So be respectful. You got to kind of accept that, you know what, in this moment that you don't like them right now. Okay. Be respectful. Don't beat yourself up about it. Hold the lens that's going to change, that you're going to end up, the brain is so good at empathizing, at finding ways to connect. And that's why everybody's like,
Mhm.
you need to build a relationship. You need to build a relationship. So respect, hold the lens that it's going to change. And remember that the more that you care and you empathize with that student, the less likely you're going to see them as a threat. I know that I kind of like
Yeah.
roller coastered that, but
I love the
I thought it was
ride. Hands in the air the whole
thanks.
time. And
Yeah.
I want to be in on that blog post with you and on that mini
Oh
training
yeah.
with you. I'm like, I want to co-write this with you, Britt. This sounds so
Oh
fun.
yeah. Rock on. All right,
Yeah.
guys. I hope you feel remoralized.
That was the most like low
Yeah,
key
I know.
way to say that.
I hope
And
you feel remoralized.
re-energized.
I hope you
And
feel
re-energized.
remoralized and re-energized.
Yes, we
And
do.
until next
And
time.
we'll see you then.
Bye.